On the Cabinet Secretary, Michael Russell, to wind up our debate.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Let us start from a fact. This debate is taking place because in 2 days' time, Scotland will be taken out of the EU against our will, and everybody here who has a passport that says they are a EU citizen will lose that designation. That is something we do not want to happen, and this government has fought against it happening. But we are very fortunate in Scotland because we have the opportunity to move on from that back into membership of the EU. And we know from polls that most people in Scotland want to be within the EU. So this is a debate about the potential that Scotland has to move away from Brexit, which has been imposed upon us, and to move towards the normality of a small nation in Europe. But the debate, of course, has also been about the record of the Scottish Government, and so it should be. And I think that Jackson Carlaw, and I want to make this point, should be concerned about government failure. Jackson Carlaw should be concerned about the failure of a government that's been in power for a long time and has failed to deliver over that period. He should be concerned about that, but the trouble is he's focused on the wrong government. Because there is another government which we need to look at in these matters, a government which tries to exercise its control and does exercise substantial budgetary control over what we do. All you have to do is to start a Google search to look at the record of the UK government. For example, let us look at some of the headlines over the past few weeks and months. Doomed hospital costs set to soar to staggering £1.1 billion. The Royal Liverpool Hospital, which is unfinished, like the Birmingham Midland Hospital. That, I think, I notice, as ever, I notice that Labour, excuse me, Presiding Officer, I am not taking any interventions from Mr Finlay, which I have to say is likely to improve the quality of this debate significantly. 1 in 8 secondary schools in England are failing. Commuters, here's a headline, are heading into their 3rd week of train chaos as a new timetable is implemented. The Prime Minister, when he wrote to the First Minister some weeks ago, used the word about the Scottish economy stagnating. This is from the Financial Times. Economic conditions remain stagnant in the 2nd quarter amid relentless Brexit uncertainty. The stagnation is in the UK economy. Let's touch on the health service. 1/5 of patients miss NHS targets. Go back to education. Examiners left horrified by flaws in English GCSE marking. What about housing? England needs to build 4 million new homes to deal with an escalating crisis. They don't like it. They don't like it. And I have to say, Presiding Officer, I don't care whether they like it or not, because it is the truth.
Order.
The crime rate.
Can we hear the Cabinet Secretary, please?
The crime rate in the rest of the UK is much worse. Rural payments are worse. The UK food industry threatened to stop cooperating with UK government because of the catastrophic impact of Brexit. English councils are braced for the biggest government cuts since 2010. Mr Fraser was particularly excited about the police and about police stations. At least there are police stations in Scotland. 600 police stations have closed since 2010. 600. Mr Fraser, Presiding Officer, I'm going to continue.
Cabinet Secretary, members, members are allowed to react. Would members please keep the noise down? We cannot hear the Cabinet Secretary's comments. Cabinet Secretary.
Well, Mr Fraser was concerned about the overspend on ferries. Has he seen the defence overspend? 1.3 billion on the frigates. I know they don't like it, but the reality of this is that in every area of government business, there is a deflection going on here. It is a deflection. It is a deflection, Presiding Officer. It is a deflection from their failures, trying to pretend that in some way they are somebody else's. They are deflecting from their own abysmal record, supported by the Liberal Democrats. No, pure deflection. Presiding officer, let me just touch on just some of the things. Let me just touch on some of the things.
One second, Cabinet Secretary. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Rumbles. That was a very good point of order. It's the very point that I'm considering myself. It is simply too noisy. Now, I can hear the Cabinet Secretary has slightly lost his voice, and I would please urge all members to keep their comments to themselves. Keep them to after
Presiding
you wish
officer,
to speak, stand up and give an intervention.
Presiding officer, there is a list of things which I could and should read out of what this government has been doing even in the last 7 days. But let me just touch on some of them. The export statistics, which Mr Mackay released this morning, show a 1.1 billion increase in international exports, and the GDP statistics show Scotland's economy grew by 0.3% during the third quarter. We have launched a wide-ranging research project to understand the needs of students. There's been a major report, even today, on deer management. We have launched our payment programme to provide financial security for farmers. We've announced a new climate change group. We have published the latest update of the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation. We've welcomed the Scottish Funding Council's budget round. We have been working in every area of national life and continue to do so. Are we perfect? Not even the First Minister is perfect. I'm sorry to say that. But we are delivering as a government. And we are delivering as a government, and the people who are failing and who have a constitutional obsession are the ones sitting there. Because they are the people who are taking us out of Europe. Admittedly, their constitutional obsession is not as great as Willie Rennie's. Willie Rennie's Save Fife from Freedom campaign is now an absolute obsession. But it is the Tories who are taking us out of the EU. It is the Tories who are spending every single moment of legislative time on Brexit, every single penny on Brexit, every single political issue is about Brexit. And that is the problem. The problem we have in Scotland is a Tory government that is taking us out of Europe. And how do we resolve that problem, Presiding Officer? By voting for independence. Independence isn't peripheral. A choice in Scotland is not peripheral. The choice is central. And that's why this debate is important. Because if this chamber this evening votes in favour of a referendum, then that must happen. We have parties in this chamber who say that all the time. But if this chamber votes by the majority for a referendum, it must happen. And it is, I think, bizarre to see any party in this chamber arguing the opposite. The Lib Dems, who are meant to be the champions of proportional representation, have said this afternoon that it does not matter how this chamber votes, they will still not recognise the wish of the Scottish people. That's not liberal, that's not democratic. Presiding Officer, just over a century ago in Cork, in January 1885, Parnell said something that needs to be borne in mind. No man has a right to fix the boundaries of the march of a nation. No man has the right to say to his country, "This far shalt thou go, and no further." No man. Certainly not Willie Rennie. Absolutely not Richard Leonard. Not Jackson Carlaw. And absolutely not Boris Johnson. If this Parliament votes for a referendum, it will have it.